that were accepted and adopted by the religions that followed Zoroastrianism. Okay, so today we have a special presentation by Mr. Kayomers Mehta. He has done a lot of research on the impact of Zoroastrianism on succeeding faiths. So we will hear from him, and after that we will have a panel discussion on different aspects that are similar in Zoroastrianism and other faiths that we discussed in this course. So with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Kayomers Mehta. And if you would, yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you, Kayomers. Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Somebody is awake.
Good morning.
That's good. That's better. Well, as you have a couple of classes in the back pocket, you guys are now should be at least fully aware of all the Zoroastrian concepts. And today we'll review, since it was the oldest religion that gave personal ethics, if Zarathustra or Prophet Zoroaster defined the clearest version of personal ethics as to what an individual should be doing and how those ethical principles and concepts have infiltrated into other religions. We'll try and throw some light into the limited time that we have. So let's get started. We'll examine the influence and also the fundamental concepts that went into the different religions in the world. First, let's review the influence on Judaism. How Judaism was completely changed into a totally different religion after the Jews were liberated from their captivity by the Persian king Cyrus.
Sorry, Kayomers, are you sharing your screen? Because we can't see it.
I'm sorry. Let me go back and see how. Now, can you see it?
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay. So I have titled my paper as Zoroastrianism is the mother of all religions. And I hope nobody has objection to it, because that's what I believe. Anyhow, so like I was saying, let's start with Judaism and see how Judaism was completely changed after the Jews were liberated from their captivity by the King Cyrus. In doing so, we'll review some of the quotations from the Bible, the Old Testament, which hails Cyrus as the Messiah from God. Then After that, we'll go on to see what Zoroastrian concepts have infiltrated into Christianity. We'll point out, we'll also point out some of the doctrinal differences that exist between the two religions. And next, we'll move to the Zoroastrian influence on Islam. We'll talk about Prophet Muhammad's tutor, personal tutor, who was a Zoroastrian priest. And we'll learn about the origination of the concept of jihad, the holy war, and other concepts. And then last but not the least, we'll learn about how Zoroastrianism influenced Buddhism. And we'll wrap up with mention of all the major world religions and how they incorporated some of the Zoroastrian concepts. And finally, then hopefully we'll arrive at our conclusion that Zoroastrianism is indeed truly the mother of all religions. So as we have learned in the previous classes that the Jews were in captivity in Babylonia, and the great Persian emperor Cyrus liberated the Jews from their captivity. This happened in about 550 BC. And history records that he made no attempts to impose his Zoroastrian religion on his subjects. He allowed them to follow the religion, to do and continue whatever they were doing. And not only that, he went on and assisted them in rebuilding the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. And his inscriptions bear witness to the fact that he encouraged not only the Jews, but all his subjects to live a good life according to their own tenets. So here's a quote from a Professor Mary Boyce of UK. This was only one of the many liberal acts recorded of Cyrus, but it was a particular moment for the religious history of mankind. And that's true because the Jews were never ever treated this good in their life. After the liberation, the Jews were connected with the Persians socially, culturally, and like I said, because they were not treated as well ever, they kind of remained very obliged and influenced by Persian concepts. So as a result, over a period of time, slowly all these different concepts started creeping into Judaism. And so the claim is that there is a complete surrounding, enveloping, and supervening influence of Zoroastrian monotheism, the belief in one God, the angelology, concept of immortal soul, judgment, individual judgment, resurrection, will in heaven, and recompense. All these concepts come to light later on in the Judaic texts. The Jews had progressed much in their ethical and spiritual conceptions after their release from the Babylonian captivity. And as a result, there were some factions, just to digress a little bit. As you might be aware, they had sects between the Jewish congregation. There were the Sadducees, who did not like to have these influences creeping into their religion. And there was another sect that were called the Pharisees, And the Pharisees were the ones that welcomed the Persian influence or the Zoroastrian influence because the concepts made sense to them. And for the first time, we see that there's a belief in future life of the soul that came up, and there are portions of Old Testament which were written before the exile scarcely mention it. Before the exile, they did not have any concept of what would happen once a person dies. And they knew no rewards or punishments for their deeds other than what they found on this earth. So everything was limited to this world and prosperity in this life only. But after the exile, all this changed. And for the first time in their history, there is expression of hope in the other world. There is an entirely new concept. And here's another quote from a later Isaiah: Let thy dead live, let thy dead body arise, awake and sing, etc. And this is from a great Old Testament scholar, Canon Shane. He mentions that the threefold division of sins into those of thought, word, and deed is thoroughly Zarathustrian. Knowledge of this great religion is necessary to the full equipment of an Old Testament scholar. And had Judaism not come into contact with Zoroastrianism, Israel would, historically speaking, have struggled in vain to satisfy its greatest religious aspirations. So there was a profound impact. Also, in the Daniel, there is a quotation, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall come to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. So, this lesson about the mortality of the soul, like I said before, was not necessarily accepted by the Sadducees. But the people who profess these concepts and who were called Pharisees finally sort of prevailed. And so most of these concepts then stayed on into Judaism. In the book of Tobit, we also have an allusion to 7 spirits. In Zoroastrianism, we have the 7 Amesha Spentas, the immortal qualities of Ora Mazda, the creator, whom we have to incorporate into our life. So these are also mentioned in Zechariah, and this is further also detailed in the book of Genesis. Another interesting observation is that the book of Genesis seems to have a lot of influences from the chapter of Zoroastrian text Vendidat. The Asmodeus or the Asmodai of the book of Tobit is probably the devil related in Avesta as the Aish. He was a demon of wrath and an opposite of vicious Pentas of the Gathas, and in Tobit he fights with the same 7 spirits. The Hebrew scriptures pay tribute to the sterling merit of Zarathustra's rule of conduct. And you'll see a lot of mention of the law of the Medes and the Persians as one which altereth not. Strict ethics, speaking the truth, was considered one of the most important tenets. Right from beginning, Zoroastrian children are taught to speak the truth, no matter what. Um, and recognition of Cyrus as Messiah, as the one who acted in Yahweh's name and authority. Also quoted, Cyrus will bring forth justice to the nations, that he will not fail till he has established this on the earth. That's from Isaiah 42. I can go on and on, but in the interest of time, suffice it to say that all these things out that the oldest of the Old Testaments had most of these concepts which went into the Old Testament and then into the New Testament and so forth. And there are all these scholars, W.R. Elgar, Juan Boland, Dr. Martin Hogg, Dr. Lawrence Mills, D. Whitney, J.C. Smith, Mike Pellis, Sutherland, Horst, etc., Miles Dawson, and many others who have testified to the fact that the change that took place in Judaism after the exile, under the influence of and with the Zoroastrian contact, was so great as to make the Jewish religion a new religion almost. And we see all this in the book of Job. The Jewish prophets, such as the second Isaiah, Daniel, and the writers of the later Psalms, and above all, Jesus Christ, were in many respects nearer to Zoroastrianism than to Judaism, the pre exilic Judaism. It is through Judaism that Christianity afterwards received all these important concepts from Zoroastrianism. So, what were these concepts mainly? Let's summarize. The concepts were belief in one supreme God, of heaven and hell. The word paradise is a Persian Zoroastrian word for heaven, of individual judgment, means whatever we do, we either get rewarded or punished according to our acts in this life, of the ultimate triumph of good over evil, and of the strict moral code. Also, there's concept of that there will be future saviors to come, the virgin birth of the final savior, the final judgment, the bathing of the world by fire. That's how whatever evil was left would be eventually destroyed. The final battle between good and evil, the defeat of the evil, resurrection of the dead. All these are original Zoroastrian concepts that filtered down into Judaism and then into the other religions. So, having reviewed this influence, we can now move on to Zoroastrianism's impact on next major religion to enlighten the world, the religion of Christianity. Zarathustra's teachings constitute the oldest testament in the annals of the religious history of the world. From Judaism, most of these concepts went into Christianity and absorbed in Islam also at a later date. So, in the interest of time, we'll keep moving forward and we can have questions later on. Let's switch our gears and move on to the impact on Christianity. So, for 600 years, from time of Christ and up to the last Zoroastrian emperor, Zoroastrianism was a very powerful presence all over that central part of the world. and it was the most prevalent religion at the time. So during that period, the Christians had the same freedom of worship as everyone else, as the Jews and any other people that were captured by the Persian kings were allowed to practice their own religions. So that earned a lot of respect and admiration for the Zoroastrian principles. And what were these Zoroastrian principles that appealed so much to Christian theology? Well, the worship of one supreme God, of course, belief of a savior to come. In Zoroastrianism, the savior is referred to as the Saoshyant. In the Christian text, they're referred to as either next to Christ, there would be some other future reformers that will come. So that was one concept that appealed to everyone. The moral, ethical contents, how to behave and deal with each other, all these matters that seem to be in harmony with Christian teachings. Concepts of angelology and demonology, life after death, like I mentioned, concept of heaven and hell, the last judgment, all these that were allegorically referred to in Zarathustra's Gathas took on a concrete, personalized look in later Zoroastrianism, and then it also passed on to both Judaism and Christianity. And here's another quotation after Dr. Mary Boyce's book. So it was out of Judaism, enriched by 5 centuries of contact with Zoroastrianism, that Christianity arose. A new religion with roots thus in 2 ancient faiths, one Semitic and the other Iranian. Doctrines taught perhaps a millennium and a half ago by Zoroaster began in this way to reach fresh hearers. But again, in Judaism and in Christianity, it lost some of the logic and coherence by their adoption into another creed. Teachings about the Iranian prophet, about creation, heaven and hell, and judgment were less intellectually coherent when part of a religion which proclaimed existence of one omnipotent God whose unrestricted rule was based not on justice but on love. So it kind of wasn't very coherent, but nevertheless, these concepts they did get introduced into the religion. And even in these settings, it exerted powerful influence on everyone's strivings to be a good person. Now we talk about the Magi's. The 3 Magi's that came to see Christ were Zoroastrian priests. There was a belief in the coming of the Savior born of a virgin mother at least a millennium and a half before Jesus was born. And most scholars agree that Jesus was not born on December 25th, which is now reckoned, which was reckoned as the winter solstice in the Julian calendar. The Romans celebrated it very fervently as the nativity of Mithra, the sun god. Mithraism was a very popular offshoot of Zoroastrianism among the Romans. And A lot of Mithraic temples are found all over Europe, the remnants. It was a corrupted and distorted form of Zoroastrianism, but even in its corrupted form, it stood for certain basic values such as truth, justice, brotherhood, kindness, loyalty, etc., etc. And all those concepts inspired allegiance among millions of Romans and Europeans. So as a result, the Mithraism was very popular all over Europe, especially in their armies and amongst the soldiers, etc. And because the celebration on December the 25th or thereabouts, um, because of the solstice, was so popular that early Christians absorbed it and gave it an interpretation and significance as birth of Christ. Franz Cumont, a noted authority on Mithraism, writes in his book that never perhaps, not even in the epoch of the Musalman invasion, Europe was in great danger of being Asiaticized than in the 3rd century. A sudden inundation of Iranian thoughts, conceptions, etc., swept over the Occident. And when the flood subsided, it left behind the consciousness of the people and the sediment of Oriental beliefs, which have never been obliterated. In fact, one goes into deeper study of the relationships between Zoroastrianism and Christianity. We can see the words of Dr. Samuel Lane. Christianity, as it became reasonable, more charitable, more pure and loftier, owes more to Zoroastrianism, and for all practical purposes, Christians are to a great extent, without knowing it, they are the worshippers of Ahura Mazda with Christ as their Ahura Mazda. So that kind of sums up a great deal about all these concepts that gave shape to the growing Christian religion. However, um, I would be amiss if I didn't point out that there are many important, compelling doctrinal differences that exist between the two faiths. And let's take a look at those. Concept of God. In Christianity, God is reached only through Christ. In Zoroastrianism, there is no intervening figure, man or divine, such as Christ. Next concept, man's relationship with God. Man is servant of God depending on Christ's mediation and dispensation. In Zoroastrianism, man is considered as God's helper. The word is hamkar, Hamkar, in furthering God's vision. The purpose of life. Purpose of life is to acquire the love of God in Christianity, but solely through Christ. Also, there's a concept that we are born in sin. Zoroastrianism categorically rejects the notion of sin. God has given man freedom to think, develop a good mind, and given him conscience that would steer him or her on the ethical path of asha, righteousness. A very fundamental difference there. The forgiveness of sin. On the forgiveness of sin, the operative thought is to repent ask for forgiveness of Christ, and then the sin is wiped off. In Zoroastrianism, there is no such instant treatment. Each person acts directly on relation to God. There is no intermediary to mediate. The sequences of life, the daily acts lived, they result in consequences. So there are no, in Zoroastrianism, there are no rewards. It is what we um, live that results in a consequence, and that seems to be the reward, good or bad. Finally, the death and salvation central event is death and resurrection of God the Christ. In Zoroastrianism, life is a battle against evil, and the human goal is to develop our soul and bring about perfect harmony by abolishing all evil. So, having done this short summary on Christianity, now we move on to Islam. Like I mentioned before, Prophet Muhammad had a tutor who was a Zoroastrian priest. His name was Dastur Dinyar. The earlier part of Quran was highly principled and theologically uplifting. Incidentally, if you learn about Prophet Muhammad's life, he first lived in Mecca. But when he made no religious headway with the merchants of Mecca, who literally ran him out of town, Prophet Muhammad moved to Medina, where he found much better receptivity, respect, wealth, and power. So the later Quran reflects this shift and introduces a lot of dogma and it sort of allows this concept of jihad and all those to spread. So there is a lot of contrast between the good Islam and the bad Islam. Main culprit is the word jihad or the holy war. This concept originated as an influence of Zoroastrianism. We believe in Zoroastrianism that there is a war that's going on in our person's mind, in each individual's mind, to seek enlightenment, what to do, how to act in every different instance, etc., how to avoid evil. So, and then the Zoroastrian teaching is that with concept of using our God-given conscience, the spirit of God that is within us, we individually make a good decision and overcome the evil. So this overcoming the evil in each decision that we live with got translated somehow to a war against other people who were considered infidels. That means they didn't believe in what the Islam religion meant. And this justified and not only justified, but it strengthened the Islamic fundamentalism that regardless of whether one gets killed, as long as it's in a holy war, the individual soul will go to heaven. So anyhow, and there are a lot of other influences on of Zoroastrianism on Islam. Some of the words in our daily prayer, praying 5 times, dividing the day into 5 zones, there is originally a Zoroastrian concept. We have 5 zones: a morning, sunrise to noon, noon to about mid-afternoon, then mid-afternoon to sunset, then sunset to sunrise. So these main tenets that also crept into, or not crept into, but they were adopted fully into Islam. So again, the belief in one supreme God, concepts of heaven and hell, end of the world, resurrection, judgment, the 5 times of daily prayer, emphasis on helping the poor. Incidentally, charity is one of the most important concepts that a Zoroastrian is supposed to practice. So those concepts, again in Christianity and in Islam, have taken a good stronghold. So it was through its influence on Judaism and Christianity that indirectly, if not directly, Zoroastrianism contributed a great deal to the very making and shaping of Islam. A government truly worthy of the name must be in accord with religion and in perfect union with it, is a Muslim maxim. This idea did not come from anywhere except from Zoroastrianism. It is outlined in a Pahlavi book, the Din Card. The theocracy and undoubtedly the Khilafat are Zoroastrian influences also. Sufism, which is the mystical part of Islam, the salt of the Islamic world, is also product and influence of the Zoroastrian spirit. So apart from mention of Darius and Cyrus amongst the Brotherhood of Prophets, Quran has very little mention of Zoroastrian faith. It may be justified in saying that the Prophet received little direct influence from Zoroastrianism. Um, I think we covered this, that Prophet's teacher or tutor was a Zoroastrian high priest by the name of Dastur Dinyar. He was late in Islamic text. His mention is changed as Salman al-Farsi, which means he was the Solomon of Persia. Also, they regard him as Ahal al-Bayt, meaning he was from the family of the Prophet, member of a spiritual circle. So this Dastur Dinyar, of course, being the tutor, had profound knowledge of Judaism and Christianity and Zoroastrianism, and therefore probably influenced Prophet Muhammad in a great manner. Custom of ablution prior to recital of prayers mimics Zoroastrian practices. Before we say our prayers, we are encouraged to physically clean ourselves, meaning wash our hands, all exposed parts of the body, and then get into prayers for the spiritual cleanup. The same concept is adapted by Islam. 5 watches of the day, and to perform prayers in each of them is also a Zoroastrian custom. Another very interesting fact is that the beginning verbiage, word to word, of the Islamic prayers are literal translations of the word to word Zoroastrian prayers, and so forth. So, with that, we'll move on and summarize the influence on the Abrahamic religions. The concepts, again, that have great influence are the belief in one supreme God, concept of heaven and hell and individual judgment, ultimate triumph of good over evil. There will come a time when all evil will be abolished, a strict moral and ethical code, the concept of Messiah to come, concept of a resurrection, a final judgment, and then a life everlasting. So, hope that exists in all the religions. The word Satan, paradise, Amen are all of Zoroastrian origins. There are several other reciting prayers in each of the 5 divisions of the day, and the Prophet's Muhammad's tutor being a Zoroastrian priest. All these have contributed to the influence on all the Abrahamic religions. Now, let's move on just briefly to another different path as to Zoroastrian's influence on Buddhism. Buddha did not start a new religion. He restored the theological purity of Hinduism. There were contacts between Zoroastrianism and Buddhism around 500 BC when the Buddhist missionaries spread out across the Parthian and the Sasanian empires. The ethical imperatives of both religions are grounded on strong principles of universalism. And there are great differences also. There were some discoveries that were made in the caves of Dunhuang that revealed to the world that Zoroastrianism and Buddhism were two state religions of China from 700 AD to 900 AD. Buddhism has two major branches, Theravada and Mahayana. And the Mahayana Buddhism is then further divided into several groups: Zen, Shingo, Shinto, Sokagaki, Chodai, and Hao in Vietnam. In Tibet, it's Lamaism. So all these religions have some concepts of Zoroastrianism that can be traced very easily. Zarathustra's ethics, the triad, threefold ethic of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. They are found in Buddha's eightfold path, where they are termed as the right thoughts, the right speech, and the right action. Zarathustra's advocacy of participation in life for worthy causes is captured in Buddha's middle way between hedonism and asceticism. Zarathustra's truth was embodied in the law of Asha, righteousness, and with God's guide, we follow the path of truth. Buddha's search for the truth is also mentioned in his path, eight uh, pole path. The two opposing poles of good and evil within men are reflected in the Buddhist religion through karma, the law of cause and effect. Zarathustra stated that man is free to think and act either good or evil, while Buddhism and Buddha said that man is in bondage to this cycle, which is a result of good and evil actions done in the past lives. So, those are some of the main things. And as we can see here, all these religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism to some extent, Taoism, Confucianism, Shinto, Jainism, Sukas, etc., were all influenced in one way or the other by Zoroastrianism. So Zarathustra launched a movement that then was picked up by Judaism, Christianity, Islam, by reform movements of Hinduism, especially in Buddhism and Jainism. So the fingerprints of Zoroastrianism are all over the sacred scriptures of Chinese and Japanese and Indonesian religions. Zarathustra's ethics have found a profound resonance in the Ten Commandments of Judaism, in the Golden Rule in Christianity, in the Middle Way and the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, and in the Upanishads of Hinduism. The ethics that Zarathustra taught govern moral conduct and civil relationship among people, societies, and the world is well accepted. Zarathustra gave meaning to life as it can be led in this 21st century in pursuit of honorable economic pursuits, with political activism in just causes, in uplifting the downtrodden, and defined in the scriptures as happiness comes to him who gives happiness to others. Incidentally, Zarathustra's call was a clarion call uttered 4,000 years before the Kyoto Protocol to save the environment, to save the Mother Earth and all her constituents air, water, plants, minerals, animals, and humans from mindless destruction and to fulfill God's design to finally move our world to perfection. So, with that, I want to conclude that Zarathustra launched a pristine theology, which became mother of all major monotheistic faiths. He influenced Buddhism, Jainism also, and some reform movements within Hinduism. We trace influence in almost all major world religions, and therefore it would be safe to say that because it has lent basic principles to most of them, it is indeed the mother of all religions. So this ends my presentation for the day. I'm sorry if I rushed you through some of these things, but in the interest of time, we wanted to have time for discussion, questions, answers, and further panel discussion. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Please unmute yourself.
We don't have any questions, but we just wanted to say thank you for this overview. It's excellent.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kayomers. Appreciate your presentation. So we take this opportunity again to remind ourselves of our last class when as we went through the Zoroastrian concept, we were mindful of similarities between those concepts and the concepts that each of us follow the religions of. So any faith that you follow, I'm sure you will find some concepts and you will say, this is the same in my faith as well. Same. So there are many, many similarities, as Kayomers pointed out. So with that in mind, I think there's a question. Go ahead, Adrienne.
Hi there. I actually put a couple of questions in the Q&A, and that might have been the place to put them. My first question is, can you talk a little bit about the relationship between Zoroastrianism and the Baha'i faith? Is there any connections there?
Okay, Kayomers, do you want to take that?
Yes, yes. A very good question. Baha'i religion is a much later religion, originated in Persia, Iran. Prophet Baha'u'llah also has taken a lot of principles of Zoroastrianism into his religion. So there are a lot of similarities. It's practiced all over the world. We have a temple in the north in Wilmette, which is a beautiful Baha'i temple. And if you go there, they used to have a video presentation or a real small introductory history. And if you ever visit that, I don't know if it's still on or not. In the basement, they used to have like a genealogy of all the prophets. And that had pictures of Prophet Zarathustra. It had pictures of Moses, Christ, Buddha, and so forth, all dated and sort of lined up. So indeed, they did recognize Zoroastrianism, and he has taken bits and pieces. Prophet Baha'u'llah took bits and pieces of everything that he thought was pertinent to this day and age, and made it as a part of the Baha'i religion. There are no priests. Common people can take on and lead the congregations, etc., etc. So there are a lot of different concepts. I don't have all the details on them, but it is certainly something that one needs to review with an open mind and see because basically, what is religion? Religion is just a way of life. It is how we live our day-to-day life. And God has given us a mind. We need to educate our mind the best we can, absorb whatever we can, whatever is good, we want to keep it. Whatever is not good or not appealing to our conscience, we set it aside. So that's what I would say. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. Now, please forgive me if this was already addressed in a previous lecture. I belong to an Abrahamic faith tradition which has heavy gender roles. And I'm wondering, in Zoroastrianism, are there defined gender roles? Like, for example, are there female identified priests?
Yes. Let me, good question, and a very pertinent one in this day and age. In Zoroastrianism, there is perfect equality when Prophet Zarathustra taught his message. The very first thing he said was that listen to me with an open mind, men and women. If you like what I'm about to tell you, try and follow it. So there was the first indication that both men and women are considered equal and have equal rights. So with that, even in today's religion, in fact, sometimes I feel that in Zoroastrianism and maybe in all other religions, the females have more rights than men in the family life because they call the shots. But regardless of that, now getting to the last portion of priests. In the old days, there were, according to whatever I know of, there were female priests and so forth. The later religion, Zoroastrianism, got a little modified after its pursuit. When the Zoroastrians left Iran and migrated to different countries, especially to India, where I am from, our forefathers, because of all the brutality of the Islamic invasion, they built a wall amongst themselves in India. And they were afraid that they would be wiped out. So in sort of earnest desire, I think they went a little overboard. They give you a little, I'm digressing a little bit. They said that all our temples, the fire temples, can only be attended by Zoroastrians, and therefore signs were put on that if you're not a Zoroastrian, do not enter, and so forth. Also, as you might have attended in the previous class, there were some promises that were made to the Hindu king that we will assimilate with the population in India. And with that, there were changes that were made in the way that we started practicing. However, Zoroastrianism also fundamentally has this principle of asha, righteousness, and it has a great sense of spiritual cleanliness concept. And I'm getting to that. I hope it's not offensive to anyone, but we believe that if a person is impure physically, then they ought not to practice other religion in a public. And therefore, for that reason, because of the menstruism concept in Zoroastrianism, females were not allowed to be the priest. Even a male priest, if he had any bleeding or anything occurring, they were not allowed to practice their priesthood. So apart from that one deviation or exception that you want to call it, Zoroastrianism has perfect equality of men and women. And it is stated at several places, if you look at datas and translations, what is true for men is true for women also. And it's stressed that way. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, it did.
Okay, if no further questions, then now we go to the next segment of our class. We have very distinguished scholars, and they have agreed to participate. So with that, I will invite Dr. Terrell to just give her observation on the class so far, and then give some observation as to what she felt and how she feels about what has been taught so far. Go ahead, Dr.
Thank you so much for this invitation, but thank you above all for the informative sessions that we've had so far. And it's done a marvelous job of situating Zoroastrianism in the proper historical context, and therefore situating all the subsequent religions in proper historical context. To me, as a theologian, there is no good theology without a good grasp of history, and this framing of world religions as a product of Zoroastrian ideas has been profoundly moving for me, and profoundly I'm grateful for it. That said, I'd like to also situate myself in this conversation as a person who considers herself spiritually eclectic. And what that means is that I first became a Christian, in name, and have subsequently been ordained in Christian ministry. But fundamentally have understood myself as a spiritual person who is in search of how to describe the immensity we call God. So that's why I became a theologian. And to me, that word describe really means now how we signify what this immensity is. And to me, and I use the word signify because we can't really properly circumscribe God to any faith tradition. We can't circumscribe God to any scripture. We cannot circumscribe God, to me. And the best we can do is to signify what we have believed through the faith traditions to which we are exposed. And I have enjoyed this immense exposure to this historical framing of humankind's search for how to describe this relationship with God. So this is really profoundly moving and profoundly informative, and also profoundly raises some questions for me as a spiritually eclectic person, ordained not only in the Christian faith, but also in the Buddhist tradition as well. It raises the question of the relationship to other religions, faith traditions, historical matrices, such as Egyptian religion. What is the relationship of Zoroastrianism to Egyptian religion? That's really profoundly a question, because I have long understood Egyptian religion as informative to Jewish faith and to Christian faith, profoundly informative about what the stories mean and the kinds of stories that get told, such as the story of the virgin birth, the story of the dying sun and the dying God and the rising sun, all of those kinds of things that you have situated in a much longer and broader and deeper context than even the Egyptian matrix of Abrahamic traditions. And so I'm deeply moved I'm deeply appreciative and convinced by the conceptualizations of how Jewish doctrines and Christian doctrines and even Buddhist doctrine of the Eightfold Path, how those are related to the ideas that Zarathustra put forward. So I'm convinced by the way that you have related them, that they are profoundly influenced by Zoroastrianism and by Zarathustra's musings and his contribution to our human quest, I think. And I think it's a human quest. I don't think it's a Christian quest. I don't think it's a Muslim quest. I think it's a human quest to try to signify what this immensity we call God means to us. It seems like everybody in the world wants to call me now while I'm on this. So I just got interrupted by an attempt at a phone call. I just declined it. But this is a human quest at trying to name this, the immensity of this spirit that that struggles in the material world. And I think that's the power of Buddhism, to name how conditioned we are by this material world. That's a profound gift of Buddhism, to name how deeply conditioned we are. And we struggle to find the path towards more goodness and less evil and less injustice. And I took a little bit of issue with Mary Boyce's declaration that Christianity was more of a search, more of a lean on love rather than on justice, as though justice and love have no relationship with each other. They have they're profoundly related. And so, and it made me think also that there are multiple Christianities and not just a Christian faith. There are multiple ways of expressing what it means to be Christian. And I actually like what Maya Angelou said about being a Christian. When someone told her that he had become a Christian, her response to him was already, meaning that it takes a long time to grasp what it means to be in relationship to Christ, what it means to be in relationship to this confluence of stories and this confluence of moral attitude, moral action, this confluence of things. What does it mean to be in relationship to that? And how do you actually do that best, signifying God, who is unable to be circumscribed, signifying God through a particular cultural format or particular religious format. That's why I remain spiritually eclectic and open to what human ideas have come about through history and through people really navigating life where they live, and coming up with something to say about this immensity and wonderfulness of God. So I'm very, very thankful for this time together. And,
okay, thank you so much, Dr. Terrell. That very good observation. I think that you said it so very well. If we were to take that as an extension, if we were to understand the different faiths that are available and understand the similarities between those, that would make us appreciate other faiths much better than believing that ours is the only one, that kind of an attitude. And the more we appreciate and more we understand, we realize that there are so many similarities. So the person sitting across us is not that different than us. We are just the same. We are all humans. And we have the same search, same longing to find out, same desire to connect with the concept, which is, as you say, undescribable and incomprehensible, and that we commonly call God. So, and the more we learn, the more we understand, the more we give a thought, the more we appreciate, the easier it becomes. I don't know whether we will ever be able to get the exact grasp of it, but whatever little that we can, that would certainly enhance our experience.
And
Okay.
that's why history is so terribly important, not just as a line of dates and a gaggle of people, but what people actually struggle to how people actually struggle to live in a context of political persecution, in a context of wars, in a context of extreme hunger and drought, in contexts that are different through empires and through all kinds of intrigue and just everyday stuff that people go through as they suffer to try to make meaning out of their suffering. And so that's what religion is, to make meaning out of suffering and to pull people together in ways that is supposed to bind them to one another in love. And I think that's the major thing is how do you get to love? How do you express that deep longing to love, longing for connection, across cultures, across religious convictions and religious doctrine that, and frankly, as a theologian, I have to be honest how I think about doctrine. Doctrine is made up stuff. It's made up, and you have antecedents in history for it, and you can see it as it emerges and what it emerges in relationship to. And so so how do you get to the basic human drive to actually live in love? And so I'm grateful. Like I say, I'm just super grateful for the moral compass that Zoroastrianism provided for humankind in a long arc of history. That moral compass to do well, to do right, to have right action, have right speech. That is an important part of getting to the most fundamental thing, which is love. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Terrell. I think something that you brought up is very interesting, the concept of doctrines. And the doctrines were introduced likely for a purpose.
Right.
And the purpose likely was to make sure that people understood and followed the actual principles of their faith. And that's the way of practicing the concepts and way of living a life that was moral and important and that was justified and that was beneficial to not only to themselves but also to their fellow human beings, regardless of their faith, of their backgrounds, etc. So, and therefore they were brought in. Some of them may be outdated now. Yes, maybe. But they had a purpose. And some we may think they are outdated, yet they're still relevant. So we have to be mindful when we look at those. And if we think in those terms, that gives us more reason to appreciate all those that was established and all those that we still practice and follow. And we respect that, not only in our own faith tradition, but in all of the faith traditions. They have a purpose. But that was very interesting observation that you shared with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Terrell.
You're welcome.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions, any observation, anything that they would like to add, so we can learn from your point of view. Please go ahead and just unmute yourself, and this is your opportunity to speak.
I'd like to thank you for this very illuminating course. It's been very inspiring and thought-provoking, and I wanted to just share that it seems to me that one of the things that is kind of a central pillar that I gathered from Zoroastrianism is a deep and sober engagement with right means. And I've been thinking a lot this last week about this central teaching of right, good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, and also the discussion just now about love. And it seems to me that as I get older, I'm almost 65 now, I am deeply aware of the need for just becoming kinder and more compassionate and trying to make sure that I'm engaging in right means. I've been thinking for more than 20 years about a statement that Gandhi made, which is that means and end are convertible terms in my philosophy of life, which strikes me as very central in a way to the teaching of Zoroastrianism as well, and perhaps all of the great world religions, in the sense that so often we are in a cynical discourse in society. We're taught to, in some ways, that the ends justify the means. You know, if you have a noble end, it doesn't matter what means you use because you just have to get to that end. But with a focus on means, it's the opposite. The teaching is that if your means are not noble, it doesn't matter how noble your ends are. You have to start and operate from a place of noble means. And if I'm not mistaken, it seems like that's a kind of a moral imperative within Zoroastrianism and perhaps all of the great world religions, to be ever aware of means and the need to do things in a way that's thoughtful and sober and kind.
Yes, thank you, Scott. That was very meaningful and thoughtful. You know, Mahatma Gandhi said a lot of things, a lot of wise things. And if you reflect on it, the source of his wisdom is Hinduism. He was a practicing Hindu. But if you also look at that and try and source it again, most of the sources are common. It would also be Zoroastrian sources. The things that he said could be found in Zoroastrianism and Hinduism. And if you extend that again further, you will find in most other faiths. So though he was a practicing Hindu, he was a practicing, he was preaching, let's put it this way, from all faiths that was common to different faiths. And that is so important, because his wisdom and his concepts are significant in the sense that they are significantly important in the time that he talked about them. Okay, there is a large question here in the chat. So I think perhaps Kayobars, you might like to take that on. So it talks about, I heard that chemetic concepts in today's presentation. To what extent has someone researched the connection between chemetic thought and Zoroastrianism? And there is a quote here: the influence of African culture on the Zoroastrianism can be seen in various aspects of the religion, including the rituals and practices. For example, Zoroastrian rituals often involve the use of music and dance, which are important elements of African religious ceremonies. And additionally, African beliefs in spirits and supernatural beings may have been influenced the concept of demons in Zoroastrianism. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kayomers?
Yes, yes. I don't necessarily know of anything of the Kemetic concepts, but what I can relate to is that, excuse me, in Zoroastrianism, we are taught that our purpose in life is twofold. One, the main goal of our life, why are we born here, is to improve our own soul, to make it perfect. In any way that we can. And then there are, of course, ways and means by developing a good mind, speaking the truth, acting right, and so forth. We help our soul to evolve. And then the secondary purpose, not necessarily less important, is not only that we want to improve our soul, but we also want to improve the rest of the world with us, so that all souls can then work in this fight against evil, abolish all the evil, and bring about the renovation or the frashocarity, making fresh, as we say. So with that, individual groups of people can rejoice in doing whatever they think is right by celebrating. And those celebrations can be in the mode of music, can be dancing, can be rejoicing in whatever way they feel that they're accomplishing their goal. I don't know if the comment that you made about demonology, all religions also have their mystic aspects. Zoroastrianism has also mystic aspects. And so does in Islam. I don't know about the lot of mysticism in Christianity, but there is this mystic aspect in life that also influences individuals and concepts in their life. We necessarily, as Zoroastrians, don't have a lot of music and dance in our congregational worships, just as Christian religion has in terms of singing and so forth, praise. And that's because of the way that we are structured. Our worship is individual. The congregational worships are there only on certain occasions and so forth. So I'm sorry that I can't address exactly what the person is requesting here, but maybe they can shed some light and let us see what that brings about.
Thank you, Kayomers. That was wonderful. I thank you so much to everyone for joining and taking part in this course. As you know now, we have arranged a site visit to our place of worship in Chicago. If Rohinton is still on the call, maybe I'll just ask him to say a couple of words and give directions as to how we can, how people can find their way to their web there. Rohinton, take it away.
Yes. Thanks, Timton, for asking. We are located, the major intersection is Route 83 and I-55 Stevenson, and it's about half a mile from there, if you could find your way. And we are expecting you at around 3 o'clock. We'll have some little ceremony that our priest will perform, and then we'll have some talks about individual practice and communal practices. And we'll have some refreshments for you. So we're expecting a whole lot of you to come and participate. If you can, please, we got room for many. So do come. We're looking forward to it.
Do you have the address?
Yeah, you have the address. I hope it's 8615 Meadowbrook Drive in Burr Ridge. And the zip is, I think, 60527. Yeah,
Yes.
60527. And if you get lost or something, I give you my telephone number, cell phone number. It's 630-248-4387. So do come, please. We're looking forward. Thank you.
We are
And
so
I put
grateful.
I put the address in chat. So 9615 Meadowbrook Drive in Burr Ridge.
888. Kempton, it's 86.
Oh, 8615. Okay, correction.
It was also emailed for anyone who's registered. Check your emails. You do have the address and email as well that was sent out earlier this week. So hopefully, I know we have we have a handful of you who RSVP'd. It's not too late. We hope that you will join us in Burr Ridge, and we are so grateful at CTS to have been for all that you both have offered us with these beautiful and informative classes. And we stand in gratitude, and we look forward to seeing some of you out in Burr Ridge. And again, this is Kim Schultz of CTS, and I apologize for not being on camera at this moment. But we do hope to see some of you there. And just also, if you will check your email, we're going to send you a form to fill out with your feedback on this class. And we would just love to hear from you, especially for our diehards who have been here every week. So you can look for an email from us as well. Is there anything else, Baba Dirza, that you wanted to say, or Rohinton?
Well, I just have to thank everyone for participating, and thanks to the organization for putting up this this course. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and thanks, Kim, for arranging this for us. We really appreciate all your help, assistance. Thank you.
Very grateful to you both and for everyone for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Hope to see some of you in a couple hours.
Yeah, thank you again.